Every Arab state colluded with the U.S. and Israel in order to see that the people of Gaza were crushed by the Israeli genocide. The Arab world left Israel a free hand to murder the people of Gaza. Every Arab state was happy to see Gaza pulverized so that they can re-enter that normalization that was going to occur before October 7th. All the Arab slaves and stooges would like to see Hamas disarmed.
I am a reaver and I was taught how to pray Salah.
That means every single time I pray,
the person who told me gets the reward.
5 times a day, from Fajr to Isha.
If you want to support someone like me in learning Salah,
then sponsor 10 people for just £100.
Remember the Prophet, peace be upon him, said,
Charity does not decrease wealth. Click the button and donate now.
Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. If you're watching this video and it's Salah time, please pause it and go pray and come back when you're done. Please check out the description section of this video to support the channel. I just watched Norman Finkelstein take on an entire Arab-Zionist panel whilst debating the topic of the supposed ceasefire in Gaza. The irony is not lost on me that Norman, a Jewish American, is advocating for justice for Palestinians, more so than his fellow panelists who are Muslim and Arab. Norman Finkelstein fearlessly called out Arab governments for not coming to the aid of Palestine, whilst Israel committed genocide in Gaza. I would say we could extend this sentiment out to the majority of Muslim countries, with only a few exceptions. Let's watch the first clip.
Not even a week into this latest ceasefire, and it already looks as if it could be under strain. There's no doubt that given the scale of destruction across the Gaza Strip, it was always going to be a complex task to retrieve the bodies of all the hostages taken during the October 7 attacks and return them to Israel. But that is exactly what Hamas signed on to, agreeing to do it within 72 hours, and yet it has failed to uphold that side of the agreement. And that has caused consternation across the border in Israel. Norman, are you surprised that this ceasefire is already looking shaky?
There are two things to say. Number one, I find it positively disgusting that you're framing this as a failure on the part of Hamas. Can you really not be aware that there are 50 million tons of rubble in Gaza? Are you not aware that according to the international humanitarian organizations, it'll take until the year 2050 to clear out the rubble in Gaza?
And yet Hamas knows this too, but they still agree to it.
Excuse me. If Hamas says it can't find some of the bodies in the rubble, you're now blaming them for that? Can you possibly comprehend how outrageous a statement that is?
Okay.
And the fact that while we're all talking about the buried hostage bodies in Gaza, there are literally, conservatively, thousands of Palestinian bodies buried in Gaza. Are you not concerned about them as well?
It's not a zero-sum game. We can be concerned about both things at the same time.
Yeah, but you didn't mention the other bodies.
So the platform this took place on was Al Arabiya, which is a UAE and Saudi Arabia-backed channel, two countries whose leaders are allied with Israel. And as you saw, the way things were being presented on this show was very similar to how the Western media portray their agenda-driven news, which makes me suspicious that there is Zionist involvement in this media company also. Why else would they present a genocide as if it was a two-sided conflict, using language that absolves Israel of any blame? Norman Finkelstein was correct to express disgust at the presenter lady for only showing concern for deceased Israeli hostages, without even mentioning the tens of thousands of dead Palestinians that are missing under 50 million tons of rubble. Norman expressed equal disgust at the presenter for framing ceasefire violations as not being Israel's fault, especially since Israel has violated the ceasefire on a daily basis over the past couple of weeks since it was signed. Let's watch the next clip.
When it comes to Hamas, it's really hard to defend the devil, because Hamas is no lesser a devil than Israel, in spite of the fact that Israel is the aggressor. If Hamas fails to deliver the remains of the Israeli hostages, I think Israel will find the proper excuse to launch the war once again.
What's going to happen, in my opinion, after each of Israel's high-tech killing sprees in Gaza, namely Operation Cast Lead in 2008-9, Operation Pillar of Defense in 2012, Operation Protective Edge in 2014, and even after Israel murdered 10 passengers on the Mavi Marmara in 2010. After each of those events, those high-tech killing sprees, Israel promised to lift the blockade of Gaza. Did it lift the blockade? No. Each time the international community said the blockade of Gaza was illegal and unsustainable. Did that stop Israel from continuing the blockade? No. And the events of October 7th were a direct result of this brutal medieval blockade of Gaza. There is no reason to suppose that this time Israel is going to even relax, let alone lift the blockade of Gaza. What will happen is, once the cameras disappear, when I say cameras, I mean the international cameras, once they disappear, we're going to return to the status quo ante October 7th with one big difference. There's nothing left in Gaza. 95% of the housing in Gaza has been pulverized. 70% of the hospitals have been destroyed. Half the schools have been destroyed. There's nothing left. And so Israel has achieved its goal. Its goal, as it announced it in the first week, was to make Gaza unlivable, so as to give the people of Gaza two choices. Choice number one, to stay and starve, or choice number two, to leave. You have to be certifiably insane to believe that Israel, after devoting 2 whole years to leveling Gaza, is now going to rebuild it for the Palestinians.
The fact that the Arabs on the panel were framing the evil the Israeli regime is guilty of committing as being on par with anyone is completely disingenuous. Again, there was no mention of the numerous ceasefire violations Israel has committed. Norman Finkelstein, however, gave many historical examples of the Israelis' post-ceasefire oppression over the decades, which he claimed led up to October 7th happening in the first place. As Norman said, the likelihood is that Israel will do the same thing this time around, with the only difference being 90% of Gaza has been completely destroyed, which Norman claimed was Israel's goal all along with starvation, genocide and land theft. Let's roll the next clip.
I almost disagree with every word Norman said. We can't really go back to 2010 every time we're discussing the agreement of last week. What I like to see happen is, number one, for each party who signed on the first phase to uphold the first phase. Why was this divided into phase 1 and phase 2? It's mainly because Hamas refuses to disarm. And disarmament is not only an Israeli request, it's a request by everyone, including, like I said, Qatar and Turkey and Saudi Arabia and the UAE and everybody else.
May I ask the representative of the Foundation for the Defense of Washington's Slaves and Stooges? He seems to be so emphatic that Hamas has to disarm. Hamas killed approximately 1,200 Israelis, 800 of whom were civilians. That's what Israel, on average, did every week for the last 2 years. Right now, there's a consensus in the international community that it was not Hamas the past 2 years, it was Israel that was committing genocide in Gaza. It was Israel that killed not 30 children on October 7th, but at bare minimum, 20,000 children. This representative of the defense of Washington's slaves and stooges,
defense of democracy.
why aren't you asking for Israel, who by international consensus was committing genocide in Gaza? Why aren't you asking for them to disarm, Mr. Slave and Stooge?
Okay, it's Mr. Hussein Abdul Hussein.
I'll just ignore the ad hominem because that's not my way of debating. I'll stick to the ideas.
You're a slave and a stooge.
Someone who's invested in that part of the world. When Israel and Lebanon were at war, I have family and friends who were suffering that war. I was not just sitting in New York and trying to pick a fight with Israel. Israel can do whatever it wants to do. My concern is on the other side. I want the Lebanese, I want the Palestinians, I want family I grew up with. And
your concern is your paycheck. Your concern is your paycheck.
We can disagree on points, but we will be respectful to our other panelists. You can continue.
I'm not respectful of a slave and a stooge.
We're not going to call names, Norman. We're going to disagree on points, but we're not going to.
The fact that the Arab panellist attempted to discredit Professor Finkelstein by disregarding his historic pattern recognition of Israel's war crimes was disgraceful. This man went on to speak about how clauses in the ceasefire deal should solely benefit Israel, and even listed off Arab and Muslim nations that are in support of such a shameful proposal. Mr. Finkelstein correctly labelled this guy and others like him as total sellouts that are only concerned about their paycheck instead of what's morally right. As Norman said, shouldn't the onus be on Israel to disarm as part of a peace deal rather than anyone else, considering that they have just killed hundreds of thousands of people in Gaza over the last 2 years? As Norman stated, Israel's genocide in Gaza was the equivalent of hundreds of October 7s back to back, resulting in a minimum of 20,000 children being killed. And like he said, anyone who tiptoes around these facts does not deserve any respect. Let's watch the next clip.
If you asked me prior to October 7th what the ideal solution would be with Hamas, it would be for Hamas to hand in its weapons to the Palestinian Authority, to reinstall the Palestinian government in Gaza, to probably create a government of national unity. That was possible. That was realistic. Hamas rejected all this. Instead, they decided to go this path, this dangerous path, and we ended up with Gaza completely destroyed. People are on the street. The situation as it is well known to everyone. How do we go from here? If Hamas doesn't carry on its commitments according to the plan it has signed, Israel will find the excuse to restart the war.
It's regrettable that your two other guests seem not to be aware of what Hamas agreed to. I am not here to defend Hamas, and I am not here for no reason at all, because I have some particular personal animus towards the state of Israel. I have only two concerns: what's truthful and what's just. Now let's start with the truthful. Your two guests, if they are capable of reading, will know
we are
that
capable.
Hamas agreed. Okay, then you are, then let's remember, what was Hamas's statement? Did Hamas agree to disarm? In its statement, did it agree to disarm? Let's have a simple yes or no. Did Hamas, in its reply to the 20-point so-called peace plan, ceasefire plan, did it agree to disarm? Or did it make an explicit stipulation that those questions or their response to those questions would come later? Did they agree to disarm?
I really don't care what Hamas says, but I've heard what Mr. Trump, your president,
I didn't ask you what you
yesterday.
care about.
They said,
you're blaming Hamas for breaking the agreement. So I'm asking a simple question. It's not difficult.
I didn't, Mr.
It's not
Mr. Finkelstein.
difficult.
Hamas has not yet broken the agreement. This still is to be seen. They may honor the agreement.
Thank you.
Please.
Let's hear it from the other guys.
Did
Hamas agree to disarm?
First of all, I find it ironic that the New Yorker is lecturing two Arab natives on what should and should not happen between Hamas and the other guys. We want Hamas to be disarmed long before the war in Gaza happened.
I agree with you. All the Arab slaves and stooges would like to see Hamas disarmed. I agree with that point. Israel just committed a genocide in Gaza, and you're blaming the whole thing on Hamas. And that's pretty disgusting.
I did not say that. Language is English.
Repellent reptile. You're a reptile. Hamas attempted international diplomacy. Hamas attempted nonviolent civil resistance, the Great March of Return, that began March 30th, 2018. You have a paycheck to earn.
Like Norman said, it's regrettable to hear Arab panellists speaking on a Saudi UAE news platform parroting back talking points that favour Israel. As Professor Finkelstein stated, this is not about taking sides, it's about what's right and wrong. As we saw, the Lebanese panellist again tried to discredit Norman Finkelstein by claiming that as a Westerner he cannot lecture Arabs about Palestine, to which Norman responded brilliantly by saying Arabs who sell out to Israel are in no position to make such demands. The fact that this panel put the blame of the Gaza genocide on anyone except for the Israelis was reptilian, as Norman put it. Let's watch the last clip.
One of the biggest criticisms, though, that we've heard recently was that recognition of a Palestinian state was a reward for Hamas. So, by extension then, is normalisation with Israel a reward for Netanyahu?
I think it's a reward for everyone. Everyone can sign peace. If we get all of these parties, whether the Palestinians and Israelis or other Arab countries and Israelis, to sign peace first, not treat peace as a reward at the end of the process.
Yes, I think Netanyahu doesn't deserve any peace deal with any Arab countries right now, unless Israel recognizes Palestine, and not only recognizes Palestine, but ends its occupation, illegal occupation to Palestine. Only then can we really talk about the Arab Peace Initiative, which requires from Israel a complete withdrawal from all Arab lands that it occupied in 1967. Only then does Israel deserve normalization with the Arab world, not because this is a just solution, but because it's a practicable solution, if I may say so.
By October 6th, 2023, the only talk in town was whether or not the Saudis were going to join the Abraham Accord. At that point, when it looked like the people of Gaza would be left to languish and die in that concentration camp, they launched the attack. Once the attack was launched and Israel retaliated with its genocide in Gaza, every Arab state colluded with the US and Israel in order to see that the people of Gaza were crushed by the Israeli genocide. With the honorable exception of the Houthis, and at a lower level, the Hezbollah, every other leadership in the Arab world left Israel a free hand to murder the people of Gaza. In fact, it was South Africa, not an Arab state, it was South Africa that went to the ICJ to stop the genocide in Gaza. Every Arab state was happy to see Gaza pulverized so that they can re-enter that normalization that was going to occur before October 7th.
Anyone who's not calling for the Israeli Prime Minister to be forced to give up his political position and be imprisoned is not focused on justice. There is no way a regional peace deal between Arab nations and Israel can be signed with that genocidal maniac and his cronies in charge. For the Arab panelists to suggest such a thing under any circumstances makes me think they're both delusional and compromised. Norman was correct when he said throughout this 2-year genocide in Gaza, no Arab state took military or economic action to stop what was happening, except from Yemeni and Lebanese groups. Norman claimed the reason for this complicity with Israel and America was for Arab countries to benefit financially from a normalization deal in the region at the expense of Palestinian lives. I wouldn't just limit this to Arab nations. I extend this inaction and greed to all Muslim countries. Professor Finkelstein added insult to injury when he said these so-called Islamic countries didn't even bother to take legal action, and instead South Africa took the moral responsibility for the matter, which as Muslim people we are extremely grateful for. My intention is to not degrade our Arab brothers and sisters in any way, as the majority of the citizens in Arab and Muslim nations were screaming at their leadership to take action in Gaza. It's simply to point out the weakness and corruption in the people in charge of those countries who are no better than crooked Western politicians. I'll leave you with a hadith quoting the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, that sums this up perfectly. The Prophet ﷺ said, "The people will call one another to attack you as if they're feasting." Someone asked, will that be because Muslims will be small in numbers at that time? He replied, no, Muslims will be numerous at that time, but you'll be like garbage floating in the ocean. And due to your disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, your enemies will not fear you because your hearts will be weak in faith. Someone asked, what is this weakness? The Prophet, peace be upon him, replied, love of the worldly life and dislike of the afterlife. Thank you for watching. Until next time, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allah.